Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Manlius Town Board meeting for August 9th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. As always, we are virtual. You can join our meetings by clicking on the link in our agenda to join us via Zoom. We're also streaming to Facebook and to YouTube. And if you're interested in participating in either open podium or any public hearings, you can join us via Zoom to do that live. Next up, I will ask Deputy Supervisor Bollinger to lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we do have a pre-submitted letter for open podium. Town clerk Weber is going to read now. We do have 4 people sign up. If you do not sign up for open podium on this sheet, we'll call for hands. And if you're here via Zoom to share for open podium, please use the raise hand function so we can promote you.
Okay, the letter I have is from Bob Wheeler. I'd like to address the town of Manlius GOP's permissive referendum on establishing a ward system for our town board. I'm sorry I could not attend tonight, yet I believe this is an important topic to discuss openly. I believe the actions of the GOP that they are revealing their true intent, not a desire or deep held belief that a ward system will somehow be a better platform for governance, but a means to establish safe seats for their party as they've been unsuccessful in their past few campaigns. If the ward system was a deep held belief, they could have enacted this at any time up to 2019, or they could bring it to the board and work towards this as it was included in the comprehensive plan. They have forced by law a special election, which will cost the town an excessive dollar amount when it could have been undertaken in a planned election if they worked with the board. For the chair of the GOP in Manlius, who is concerned about the cost of the comprehensive plan, this strikes me as odd. Perhaps it's not odd when it's a known fact that special elections, in addition to costing additional taxpayer money, also have lower turnout. The Ohio GOP admitted this when they hypocritically had an August special election after voting not to hold special elections due to higher cost and low turnout. They held it because they wanted a lower turnout to get the vote they wanted. Our GOP is doing the same. A ward system will not give more voice to the few. It will create safe zones for both parties, which tends to lead to less compromise and urgency for the entire town. It will create board members who will only care about their ward and not our town. Our U.S. House of Representatives is a prime example of what happens when you have these safe seats, less cooperation, and poor governance. In this level of our democracy, we must maintain a one vote, one voice approach to continue to get the best candidates and governance. The town of Manlius is still a closely split town, and I'm confident that the best candidates will continue to prevail as they should. Thank you, Bob Wheeler.
Thank you. Next up, we have Joe Messinio.
Good evening. My name is Joe Messinio. I'm on South Springs Road. I have 2 quick topics I wanted to mention. My neighbors, about 20 of us, submitted a series of questions regarding the proposed water transit line on the 6th of July and then again on the 26th. And we just encourage you to answer those specific questions. That's all a reminder. And then the other topic is totally unrelated to that. The way I read state law, it suggests that there should be town should consider a board of ethics. And Tim, please correct me if I'm getting this wrong. This I'm reading from the Town of Manlius Code adopted 3/13/91, Chapter 4. And in the code, it says establishment of board of ethics. There is hereby established a board of ethics consisting of 3 members to be appointed by the town board, all of whom reside in the town, who shall serve without compensation at the pleasure of the board. The majority of such members shall be persons other than elected appointed officers or employees of the town, but the board shall include 1 member who is an elected or appointed officer of the town. I've had a couple of instances where I've asked for, if you will, adjudication on issues of ethics, but we have no board. So I encourage you to adhere to the town code, and I think it would be in the best interest of everybody to have some independent people take a look at issues that are raised by the citizens. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have Tom Bassett.
Good evening. The rest of my case, not the Wheeler comment. No, my daughter-in-law is sort of semi-forced into coming and talking about this, permissive referendum that has been, the petition for which has been submitted. So I just have a few comments. Many of the observations have already been disclosed in the material that's been submitted and in the Eagle Bulletin article. But the entirety of the petition was witnessed by a litany of current and former Republican office holders in the town, or former office holders. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but they obviously gathered together and decided to make a concerted effort to gather the requisite number of signatures on the petitions so that they could proceed under the section of the town law, which very few people even knew existed, at least I didn't. So I don't know of any other discussion that's occurred in open podium or prior to this with respect to the ward system, but apparently in the development of the comprehensive plan, it was discussed, and it's an item for discussion going forward in a reasoned way to analyze the pros and cons, and then either propose a system or not. But right now, there has been no meeting of the minds. There has been no discussion. And this is all apparently a moot point because the statute provides for this referendum regardless of what you all decide going forward. Anyway, it's been discussed that there's a significant financial cost by having the special election referendum at a time other than the normal November election date. That's a negative factor. It appears what the petitioners desire is for a motivated group of people who want the ward system to turn out, and they're hoping that a sufficiently high number of opponents will not turn out on the special election date, which seems to sort of defeat the whole democratic process in that regard. So if the referendum is successful, it would seem that the consequence would likely be that there'd be at least one or two districts that would probably have a majority Republican content, and there would probably be at least one Republican voted to the town board. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it would not result in sort of recapture of the whole board by the party that used to have 100% full control of the board. I had a discussion with my across the street neighbor, former Councilor John Leffler. He said that years ago, when he was a board member, the Democrats proposed a ward system. I don't know if they went through a permissive referendum process, but that was blocked by the then 100% Republican town board, as far as I know, and therefore not considered. So it's sort of hypocritical now to propose such a system when the tables were turned, it was rejected. So I'm ambivalent about the merits, but the merits ought to be discussed. And because there is, the city of Syracuse, for example, has a ward system. They have they have wards, they also have at-large representatives. And there's a merit to a combined system, but I don't know that the town law provides for that, allows that. So that's not probably a feasible alternative. But anyway, that's thanks for listening to my opinion, even though it's all irrelevant because the referendum is going to happen anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Michael Nessie.
Michael Neshi, I live up in Fremont, and I'm gonna speak about the wards too, but I don't know if I could speak as beautifully as the gentleman spoke there. He made a lot of good points and it was very well spoken, but I think what I just want to convey to the board is that I'm disappointed been a resident here for 20 years, and it's disappointing that there wasn't more conversation around the issue and that there wasn't public meetings and public involvement, because we're hearing a lot from both parties that inclusivity of the townspeople is very important in hearing and leading the town forward. Both parties say that they want to do that with input from the townspeople. And this is something I think that went forward, signed by townspeople, but didn't have a whole lot of involvement from the rest of the town. Myself, I don't recall, no one in my family recalls a knock on the door or anyone reaching out for input. There wasn't public meetings. I also feel that it'd be important to have such an election if inclusivity mattered. It would be important to have such an election during a general election, right? Because historically, it's proven that there's higher voter turnout during a general election. So if we really wanted to hear from the people in this town on how they want the town to elect its officials, we would do so during a general election. And that's all I have on the matter. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Casey Cleary. Just again, everyone's running via Zoom. If you'd like to be up next, please use the raise hand function.
My name is Casey Cleary. My family has lived in the town for 24 years, a couple of years in the village of Manlius and 20 in the village of Fayetteville. I want to thank you for this opportunity to have an open podium. We don't have that in all municipalities. For reasons too many to go into, I view this petition as the most seriously divisive political action we have yet seen by Tim Kelly, Chair of the Manlius Republican Committee, and a candidate for town supervisor. I understand that Mr. Kelly believes this is not a political action, but when 2/3 of the signatories on this petition were registered Republicans, and many of the witnesses were Republicans too, I don't have that number, there's no way to see this as other than a partisan action. I want to just sink into the fact that we were celebrating the last time we were together and the last two meetings, how we came together as a town and listened to each other and took the time to talk and solicit opinions from each other on a really broad range of issues that resulted in a beautiful, highly lauded comprehensive plan. And when I look at this comprehensive plan, there's a goal that we will have effective, responsive, and collaborative government operations. And I applaud you because I think that you truly live up to that in every action you take. But, and in this, I've asked some questions about this. And under the implementation of this particular goal, you say you want to study the viability of establishing a ward-like system for council members. You put that on the table, from what I understand, as a result of your conversations with the residents in the north part of the town. Again, you're doing the right thing. You didn't jump the gun and say, let's have a ward system. You said we must follow our process and solicit community input. And that is not what we have now. What we have now is something that has been plunged into your laps for you to clean up that does not reflect the kind of practice that we want as citizens. We participated in this comprehensive plan. It's not yours, it's ours. So I view this as an insult to all of the participants of the comprehensive plan. When one individual decides in his own quote, he wants to put the, he says, it's been talked about, but I'm the one who put the foot on the gas to get it going. That's one type of leadership, and this is another type of leadership. I only want to say also that because this is an unexpected expense, you may be really thinking hard about spending as little as possible on how to handle this. I'm not sure that that's the best approach. I encourage you to continue to follow what is your standard procedure and do everything that you can to inform the public about this petition, particularly why it's so confusing and how it, what the pros and cons. Thanks.
Anyone else here who'd like to make a comment for voting?
Well, John Boyd, North Manlius Street. My view is not political. Today, I stand before you to express my strong opposition to the proposed implementation of a ward system in our town. While I understand the concerns some have raised about the current representation on the town board, I firmly believe that adopting a ward system would risk giving a political platform to radical individuals who could potentially erode the very fabric of our community. Let's delve into that critical concern. As recent events have shown, we have taken a resolute stance against hate, discrimination, and bigotry. We have rejected the dangerous ideologies that seek to divide us, as witnessed in our collective response to the recent white supremacist rallies that have taken place in this town. However, the proposed ward system, though seemingly innocent on the surface, could inadvertently provide an opportunity for radical voices to gain influence within our local government. Consider this: in a ward system, each board member represents a specific area of the population within our town. While this may provide localized representation, it also means that certain pockets of our community could become echo chambers for extremist viewpoints. This poses a significant risk. We've all seen how hate groups and extremist organizations exploit democratic processes to further their agendas. By adopting a ward system, we could unintentionally grant them a foothold in our local government, potentially giving voice to ideologies that are antithetical to the values we hold dear. Now, let's not forget that the proposed change in the town electoral system coincides with the rise in such radical ideologies in various parts of the country. We must remain vigilant and cautious about any changes that could potentially offer an avenue for these dangerous elements to infiltrate our town's governance. Moreover, a ward system might incentivize individuals with extremist agendas to focus their efforts on specific areas where they believe their ideas could gain traction. This targeted approach could lead to a situation where one or more wards become dominated by radical representatives, leading to a lack of balance and a loss of broader perspective that the town-wide approach offers. In conclusion, while the current system may not be perfect, adopting a ward system poses a significant risk to our community, its unity, its stability, and its values. We must consider the potential consequences of unintentionally providing a platform for radical voices that seek to undermine the harmony that we've built. Instead, let us continue to stand united against hate and division, embracing our diversity and working together to address any concerns within our current framework. Together we stand, divided we fall. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I echo everybody else, except I did want to thank Allison for a really good job on that legality question. And Tim, I figured, I'm Barb Wilson and I'm Horse Lane. And I'm not here to talk about water. So, but I do, it resonates with all the things that have been said against the ward system, resonate with me. But it doesn't really matter what my opinion is of this, except that as a voter who read Tim Kelly's statement in the Syracuse.com article about it not having anything to do with political affiliation, it has to do with fair representation and or fairness. And so I was kind of figuring out whether or not fairness applied to the rest of us who didn't know anything about this before it happened, don't have an opportunity except for 3 minutes at an open forum right now to talk about it. And whether or not the town, you know, my money is going to go to a special election that I'm adamantly opposed to, when there is an election coming up in November that wouldn't cost us anything except a line item on a ballot. If there aren't absentee ballots, we won't even be able to vote. And I think I heard that might not be an option. So, you know, it just bothers me that this was sort of not just railroading you, but all of us in the town have been railroaded, because the publicity over this is really divisive. It's, you know, on the Nextdoor app, people are yelling at each other or talking reasonably between each other, and yet at the same time, people are very, very confused by what the consequences of this vote are, and everyone is in agreement that it's all too rushed, it's too soon, it's expensive. we were faulted, I think, by one of the signers, for running for costing us $17,000 to hire a lawyer. Well, I think the special election is gonna be far more than that. And it feels like that didn't matter to them, to the people who signed this petition. That being fiscally responsible went right out the window with this decision, because you're being forced into a 60 to 75 day date. So I think that when you talk about the ward system later on in this meeting, I think letting us know approximately how much is this gonna cost? Is there room for negotiation with the signers to find out whether or not they'd be willing to let it go in fairness to the voting public? You know, use his word. I mean, I feel like if that doesn't happen, and we can't run a special election to allow every voter to vote, and we have to pay for the publicity that goes along with it, more than a column in the paper written by David Tyler, you know, I feel like that's not going to be enough. It is not fair to run this election the way they have presented it to us. And that is the only opinion really that I have. And I know it doesn't matter, but I feel like we should make sure we know what we're getting into here. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
My name's Craig Dudzak. I wasn't going to speak today, but I want to ask, and I know you can't answer them because it's not a colloquy, but I want to ask some questions that are unknown about the referendum. And several of the previous speakers haven't raised it, so I want to. The first question on representation is it a requirement of a ward system that the representative be resident to the ward in which he or she is elected? And I ask that question because we know, for example, that our current representative for District 22 lives in District 24. And ironically, the representative for District 24 lives in District 22, New York District Congressional. So there's nothing in the document that talks about whether a representative is in fact a de facto resident of the area he or she represents. Second question. I looked at the documents that were submitted. I'll just acknowledge that I am, for the last couple of years, a Onondaga County election inspector, which means that when you come to vote, you have to sign your name and it has to be compared with a signature that is in the county registration log. And what has happened lately is a lot of people use what we call credit card signatures. Instead of their official signature, they do a swoosh and, you know, we require them to come back so that there is a relatively reasonable similarity between the signature that is offered and the one that is registered. My question is, since the town clerk has validated the petition, has that process been done? I'm not questioning whether or not someone signed illegally or we got, right, but that seems to be a normal process to validate the validity of a signature. And was that process used here? Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes. Okay, going online. Thank you for the comments on the petition. We do have that later on the agenda. We'll be addressing a number of those questions. So, could you please promote, Peggy Kurtz, for a conversation on dual community energy and clean energy program.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear us?
I'm sorry, do you hear me? Can you hear me? I'm sorry? Are you hearing me?
Yes, Peggy, they can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, so thank you very much. It's good to be here with you all this evening. As my name is Peggy Kurtz, I'm a community coordinator for Jewel Community Power. Jewel administers community-based clean energy programs. I'm just going to present from my screen. Hopefully, that'll be good while I'm talking. Okay. Now I can't see you all, but okay. So hopefully you can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
No, you don't see your screen.
You don't see my screen.
We have sharing turned on.
I'm sorry.
And sharing.
Can you see my screen now?
No, some panelists can share.
Oh, I didn't, oh, share screen. Sorry, I forgot to do that one little thing. You can see it now, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna present. That means that I probably may not be able to see you, but okay. Can you see it? You can see it now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I know you've recently heard from Good Energy, so some of this may overlap in terms of explanations of the program, but I do want to go through quickly just to be sure that you've heard the most essential points. As I was starting to say, Jewel administers community-based clean energy programs. That's what we do, emphasis on the renewable energy. Jewel Community Power is one of the leading administrators in New York State for community choice aggregation renewable energy programs, or CCA for short. Our mission is to make renewable energy affordable for all. We help communities make the transition to clean energy while also potentially delivering savings on energy costs. I know that Manlius is a certified climate smart community and a designated clean energy community. I know you've got some very impressive accomplishments already. CCA is truly one of the next big steps that will help move your community to the next level in both of these programs. And as you'll hear me say again, it's also a major climate action for your community. One of the most important, the biggest, highest impact actions the community can take in terms of climate. Jewel is a leader in clean energy CCA programs in New York State. Jewel programs also saved participants over $18 million in 2022 and $20 million since 2019. Jewel is currently working with 56 municipalities across New York State, representing over 800,000 households. So what is community choice aggregation? CCA programs enable municipalities to replace the state-selected default energy source for their constituents for electricity. So if you move into Manlius today, your default energy source will be, is it National Grid? Am I correct in thinking that? Okay. Which was selected by the state many decades ago. CCA moves that choice to the community level so that municipal leaders may choose what's best for their own community. And this is possible legally through Home Rule Authority and an order of the Public Service Commission in 2016. Municipalities, another way of saying this is that through CCA, municipalities basically create a large buying group through which residents and small businesses may purchase their energy for electricity. Municipalities can leverage the buying power of that large group, which is generally several municipalities, sometimes as many as 10 or 12, and tens of thousands of households, so that they can even select renewable energy and still achieve cost savings for residents. CCA programs are still today overseen by the Public Service Commission. Some of the benefits include clean, renewable energy, cost savings, strong consumer protection, and more choice for consumers. And I'm going through them quickly now, but I'll talk about each of those in more detail. In 2019, in response to climate change, New York State passed groundbreaking climate legislation, which mandates an unprecedented transformation of the state's electric grid. The electric grid must be powered 70% by renewable energy by 2030. So at this point, that's less than 6.5 years away, and it must be 100% carbon-free by 2040. The state cannot meet these very ambitious and urgently needed goals, which will ultimately help to protect our own communities and our own families without action by local leaders. The program we're discussing today helps communities take a major step in the direction of those goals. And that's why CCA programs are considered by state climate regulators to be among the most powerful climate actions a community can take. More than 80% of Juul's CCA participants have switched to renewable energy, allowing our communities to reach their sustainability goals, helping them to reach it, and making a measurable, I want to emphasize that word, measurable reduction in their carbon footprint. CCA is a growing movement in New York State. There are over 160 communities that are either in a CCA program or moving ahead toward participating in a CCA program. CCA started in New York State with a pilot program in Westchester that was actually established. The Juul principles, the principles in Juul assets were among the leaders in starting that program in Westchester. And that was a pilot program in Westchester, and today over 2/3 of Westchester communities are participating in a similar program. But the really big news is that CCA programs currently make up about 30% of what's called the voluntary clean energy market in New York State. So altogether, CCA programs are really having a major impact in helping that transition to renewable energy. As you may already know, the utility continues in the same role as before. In New York State, the utility no longer actually supplies the energy. In 1998, the Public Service Commission separated out supply and delivery in order to foster more competition and lower costs for consumers. So the utility essentially has become the middleman delivering the energy to the consumers on the right-hand side. What does change is the source of the energy, which can potentially be renewable energy. The utility continues to deliver the electricity, repair and maintain the lines, and bill customers. They are still the ones to call in the event of power outages, which should be no more frequent than before. So CCA programs are opt-out programs. People often ask why the opt-out structure. The answer is that by acting collectively, you can get a better deal than you can get on your own as an individual. When you go out on the energy as a customer on the energy market, that's an opt-in market. And what you get is what's in the orange bubble on the left-hand side of the screen. What you get is aggressive marketing. You get teaser rates. They often the ESCOs or third-party suppliers bring you in at a low introductory rate, only to raise your rates, sometimes to truly exorbitant rates. You have no leverage because you're shopping as an individual. There are long, confusing contracts that most of us don't understand and don't read. Very slow uptake of renewable energy. Only about 1% to 2% of households in most communities are on ESCO contracts with renewable energy. On the right-hand side, in the green bubble, you see the benefits of acting collectively as a community with an opt-out market. So the first thing I'd cite is major climate impact as a community. Through these programs, communities are able to move as much as 80% of their community, of their residents, through one seamless process onto clean energy. So that's a big difference from 1% to 2% of the community to as much as 80% of the community. In effect, with this program, also the municipality offer the residents a protective canopy, negotiating on their behalf with a contract that's written to protect their residents. There are potential cost savings, and it is really only through the large group that we can achieve substantial cost savings. There's strong consumer protection. I can't emphasize that enough. It's something I've really come to understand since I started working for the program several years ago. There's no individual contracts for consumers, no exit fees, stable rates. Anybody can opt out at any time with no exit fee. There's increased consumer choice. All of the same energy choices as before are still available to consumers, with as many as 3 additional choices. And it really accelerates the transition to renewable energy. So now let's talk about rates. So far, Juul programs have operated with fixed rates. This graph is looking at taking the example of Rockland Community Power. I live in Rockland County, which is a little bit north of the city and just on the New Jersey border. And this looks at Rockland Community Power rates over 2 years of the previous program, from November of 2020 through October of 2022. The zigzag line is for the O&R rates, the utility rates, which are always variable rates. The 2 flat lines at the bottom, the blue and the orange, are for the 2 fixed program rates. The default rate for Juul communities is nearly always renewable energy in every community except for one, actually, and that's represented by the blue line. And the orange line all the way at the bottom represents standard energy, which mirrors the same mix of energy as the utility, which in our case is about 87% powered by fossil fuels. Unfortunately, fossil fuels are still a bit cheaper than renewable energy. CCA programs help to remove or reduce that obstacle. The first half of this graph is a more typical year. That's what you're seeing. Over the first year, the utility rates were sometimes below the program rates, sometimes below the renewable energy, and sometimes very close to the fixed rate for the standard energy within the program. But they paid off still. People still came out ahead because of the peak rates, and that's the winter and the summer. And in the summer, of course, not only are the utility rates generally peaking, but you're also using the most electricity that you're using all year. So it really kind of hits you with a double whammy. The second half of the graph, is 2022. And what you see there is really how the program rates really helped to protect consumers from rate spikes. 2022 was a tough year for energy costs. There was the war in Ukraine was the big factor, but also inflation and a cold winter followed by a record hot summer. So you can really see that the 2 program rates just kept on going, 2 flat lines, and really insulated the consumers from the program participants from the rate spikes. So utility rates fluctuate from month to month, so we can really only talk about past performance. We can't tell you what your rates would be until the end of the process, and you don't sign anything until you know what the new rates would be. So the city of Rochester is, I believe, as we speak, launching its second round. Their rate savings from September of 2021 to June 2023 came to $2.8 million with renewable energy. And for the villages of Brockport and Lima, I'm hoping you can see this entirely. Their collectives are much smaller, of course. Their collective savings came to $220,000 with renewable energy, and the average household savings with renewable energy came to $155. In the Hudson Valley in 2022, which you saw how the difference between the utility rates and the program rates that were similar to what happened in Rockland. They saved $7 million in 2022. The 6 Rockland communities where you saw the graph, they saved $10 million over 2 years. And on average for the households on renewable energy, that came to about $330 in savings per household over 2 years. So far, I haven't mentioned opt-out community solar, but we plan to make that available again. We're pending regulatory decisions statewide. We're just waiting for those decisions to go through. We do plan to offer it as an opt-out program again. Both CCA and opt-out community solar, you probably already know, accrue major points in both of these programs. And I'm sure you know, clean energy community grants do not require matching funds. In addition, Jewel acts as an energy advisor to the participating municipalities on all things relating to renewable energy, battery storage, including solar, wind power, energy storage, as I said, and EV charging stations. That means advising communities on renewable energy projects that they're thinking of for their own property, or evaluating or participating in other local projects that are proposed within their municipality, the township, or that are proposed for the town to participate in outside of the township. We also can help the town develop new projects, and we support the municipality with identifying available funding. Okay, this is a turnkey program. I want to emphasize that Jewel does nearly all of the work for the municipality. I guess I would say there's some work for the municipality in the beginning to launch the program, but really the vast majority of it is done for the municipality, including public outreach, negotiation of contracts with energy suppliers, and creating the RFPs, regulatory compliance, and ongoing individual customer service throughout the life of the program with our helpline. There is no direct cost to municipalities or to consumers. Jewel collects the fees from the energy supplier, and it amounts to about $1 per household per month. Sorry about that. Everything is included in the rate that the municipality approves at the end of the process. There are no additional or hidden fees for consumers. So why Jewel? What makes Jewel stand out? Jewel is really a national leader in clean energy programs. That's our reason for being. We are a leader in New York State in CCA with renewable energy. As I mentioned, every community except for one is offering the default renewable energy while also offering alternatives. So most recently, communities were offering either 100% or 50% renewable energy as the default, but still offering the other alternative, and also offering the this standard energy as a less expensive alternative for those of your residents or small businesses who would prefer or need to choose that. We were the first program administrator in the United States to offer community solar as part of our program. We are also the first to offer opt-out community solar, which has some distinct advantages to it. And that program also prioritizes low to moderate income households. We represent over 800,000 New Yorkers. We really are focused on New York and located in New York. We have a proven track record, even on cost. 99.5% of our households have saved money, often beating the alternative program administrator. We have a very strong program of public education and ongoing customer service. That's really one of the strengths of Jewel, is that community engagement, assistance, and education. And this is important because you want your community to understand the program as much as possible. We go above and beyond what's required by the Public Service Commission. Before the program begins, before it launches, we do as much community outreach as we can, attending local meetings as possible, doing online information sessions, articles, social media, ads, to really prepare the community so that they understand by the time they get a mailing what the program is really about, or at least it's sort of on their radar. We also have our own helpline, which gives individual assistance to your constituents throughout the life of the program. So just to recap some of the benefits before I wrap up, clean energy at more affordable rates. As I mentioned, it's a very powerful climate action because you're switching basically as a community. People will opt out, that's fine, but you're really basically switching as a community onto clean energy. Consumer choice, everybody has all the same choices as before with 3 additional choices. There's no contract for consumers, there's no exit fees. What you see is what you get. Local choice, it really moves the choice from the state down to municipal leaders so they can choose what's best for their own community. And cost savings, potential for cost savings, $18 million saved by dual programs in 2022, 20 million since 2019, and the benefits stay local. So the first 2 steps are both non-binding and exploratory. In fact, everything in the program remains exploratory and non-binding right up until the final step when you see the bids that come in from the suppliers and decide that you want that a bid is satisfactory. The first 2 steps are to approve a CCA local law. Again, non-binding, you can just pass it and do nothing. We hope you'll want to move ahead. Selecting Jewel as a program administrator allows us to begin the process to file an implementation plan and gather the information about the community that will help us to move forward. And that's really it. Now I'm ready for your questions. I can, I'll stop sharing so it makes it a little easier to talk to each other, but obviously I'll share I think I did already share the PowerPoint with you, but if I didn't, I'll just be glad to do that.
Thank you. So I think everyone is here from another provider. So I think that last slide really does show us if we're interested in this. The goal was to hear from another provider so that we could assess both. But it sounds like, I think in general, we're interested in this. We could look at the law and drafting that and adopting it, while at the same time preparing for that RFP when we go out and see the rates.
I'm sorry, it is really difficult for me to hear you. Is there a way to? I'm sorry.
So we were just saying that, I think we had a previous presentation, as I stated. Actually, Elena, if you want to.
Those supposed to be this here?
Yeah. But I guess first off, is there any questions from the board?
Peggy, can you hear John better now? Is it a little clearer now?
A little bit better just now, yes.
So Peggy, I did have a question for you. When we explored community choice aggregation last year, I spoke with our colleague at the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board, and she mentioned that there was a backlog to a significant extent in New York State for renewable energy community choice aggregation, that much like our municipalities across the state are experiencing these renewable energy projects being held up. So how are you able to offer, like if we opted in, where would you get all the renewable energy from?
Okay, so I think, I'm just going to repeat the question so I'm sure that I heard it correctly. So you're saying that you've heard that there's a backlog for renewable energy projects. Is that correct?
Yes, specifically for the supply that CCA would need to fulfill its obligations that it's already committed to.
So the projects that the energy that is, when we go out to bid, the suppliers are coming back with energy from already existing projects. So that's not really a problem, or we're not really at the point now that there's a problem. It may be true for the future, but it's really not a problem right now. they're hedging, they're purchasing that energy ahead of time, and they're purchasing it from already existing projects. Community solar is, those are new projects that are still to come on board. So when you subscribe to community solar, those projects have yet to launch. But the CCA project, the base electricity supply, that's from already existing projects.
Are those projects located in New York State or are those projects from elsewhere in the country?
Okay, so that's a good question. So the 100% renewable energy is really what you want if you want to get credit for it within the climate smart communities or the clean energy communities programs. That's the requirement. And the 100% renewable energy means 100% renewable energy, 100% sourced from within New York State. So I can't speak for future contracts, but I know that the two contracts that I've been involved with so far have been for, the 3 contracts that I've been with so far have been for mostly based on hydropower, small hydropower, already existing hydropower from within New York State, and wind power from within New York State. I know eventually they're thinking also of offshore wind. And yeah, okay, so that's the 100% renewable energy. 50% renewable energy is less expensive, and that's because what it really is 50% renewable energy from within New York State, same as what I just described before, and 50% is matched by wind energy, renewable energy certificates from out of state. Unfortunately, New York State, the energy has to be matched by New York State renewable energy certificates in order to qualify. And New York State renewable energy certificates are particularly expensive. So that does drive up the cost somewhat. And so some communities recently have chosen the 50% instead of the 100%. They're still essentially giving people renewable energy, but it doesn't qualify within those 2 climate programs for more points, if that's the most important. That's just a decision that each community makes, which one they want to use as the default.
So the 50% one is only 50% renewable energy, or it's only 50% renewable energy from New York State?
So New York State will not allow anybody to call it 100%, even though 50% plus 50% equals 100%. We are not allowed to say, yes, really 50% plus 50% means 100% renewable energy, because it does not qualify in New York State as renewable energy unless it's produced in New York State, sourced in New York State, and it's matched by New York State renewable energy certificates. So essentially, what can I say? It is renewable energy, but it is 100%, but it's not. It does not qualify as renewable energy in New York State.
For the climate smart and clean energy community program.
That's correct. That's correct. At least as it is right now. I know they have considered maybe changing that going forward, but as it is right now, 50% renewable does not, because so many communities, are trying to grapple with the high costs of energy. They're trying to, I know they've talked about possibly considering changing that. But as it is right now, it has to be 100% sourced from within New York State to qualify. And that's a decision the community doesn't make until they see the prices at the end of the line, and then they decide, they get a heads up ahead of time. Here's what we're seeing from Jewel. Here's what we're seeing, and then so they have time to think over the choices. And then at the end, they make that decision. What do they want to offer to the community? What do they want to make as the default?
Other questions?
Any questions about opt-out community solar versus sometimes there's confusion about that?
So we're in the process right now of developing a community solar array on our retired landfill. So we're pretty familiar with that. Is that what you're referring to? Just like standalone community solar project?
So that's great. It's opt-out community solar. I'm thinking I'm guessing that the solar project that you're developing right now will not be big enough to be able to offer it to your residents, or not to very many of your residents. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So opt-out community solar would, and possibly another solar project on your property, on a town building, or over parking lots, or something of that sort. That's the kind of thing that my bosses could talk to you about, that can do that kind of advising. But the community solar projects don't have to be on your own property. They can be they need to be located someplace within the utility territory. And they can be offered more broadly, let's say to residents. And it does not, I just want to emphasize where the confusion comes in very often is that community solar does not duplicate or overlap with the base electricity supply. It actually does not, I know it feels like it, but it's not actually directly replacing the energy that you're using yourself in your own household or in your small business. So it doesn't conflict with it, it doesn't duplicate, and it doesn't overlap. And it's great to do both. We strongly encourage communities to do both.
Is this presentation going to be made available to us?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
If I haven't already sent it, I'll be glad to. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So I think
That's great.
the two presentations from two different companies. I think there's a general understanding we're interested in the CCA law, so we can start doing that, and then we'll reach out to various places, and we'll begin the bidding process. So thank you very much for the time.
Sure. What I'm going to do is follow up with, I'll send you over the PowerPoint, and I'll also send references, and I'll send you our version of the CCA law, which I think is more updated than what NYSERDA has on their website. And I'm glad to connect you with my boss if you want to discuss the CCA law further.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it was nice meeting you all.
Again.
Okay.
Okay, so next up, we are at Twin Ponds. This is for a planned unit development request. So just to refresh everyone's memory, I don't know what the sharing situation is. Let's start. I'm assuming you're Charlie. Yep. You turn it over to Charlie. So, just as a reminder to everybody, we looked at an enacting law for PUDs earlier this year for this particular project is the one that started that conversation. We have since passed that enacting law, and just as a refresher, planned unit development district plan that is going to be presented to us in a lot of ways is a negotiated zone for a particular project that governs how the parcel can be used. And what we're seeing is after some conversations between some members of the board and other town staff with the developers, and we've got a pretty interesting proposal on the table. So, is that right?
Thank you. Appreciate the time. I know you have a lengthy agenda, so we'll try to be efficient with it. But let me start by introducing our team. My name is Brody Smith. I'm an attorney at Bond Shinnick & King, and I represent Twin Ponds LLC, who is the developer. To my right is Brian Bouchard from CHA. He's our engineer who's prepared the district plan. And then Charlie Brewer is our client, who's going to be drawing the slides here. So we appreciate the opportunity to present to you, and please interrupt me as much as you would like, as often as you would like, to answer questions. What I will try to do, because I know you've had the district plan for quite some time and you've read it, I'm not going to read it to you, but I'm going to hit a couple highlights and talk about just a few pieces of it. And then we'll transition to Brian, who'll walk you through the district plan map. And then hopefully we'll get questions throughout. So this development is primarily going to be used for multi-family dwellings. And that's pretty clear from the map. Now, our interactions with the town have said that there's a desire for supportive other uses like retail or restaurants, that sort of thing. So there's a provision in the district plan to allow for that in a limited way. If you look at the structure of the district plan, it's meant to look a lot like the code. we took provisions from your code and tried to have it tracked, because essentially, I know this is your first time using your PUD law. When you adopt a district plan, it operates a lot like an amendment to your zoning code. It's a new zone in a sense. It's a floating zone that you choose where to land it. The first section talks about those uses, and Brian will go over the map, but essentially it's not too complex. It's 3 zones. One's the vast majority of the space is being reserved for open space. Then the next biggest segment will be the multifamily dwelling space, and then a smaller area that would be set aside for mixed use. Incidentally, taking one step back, in the past, the reason that this property has never been able to develop, been developed in the way that the community desired it to be, is because as you look at the map, it's dominated by water. So without you passing this PUD law, without you passing a district plan, this parcel has never been eligible to be developed with any kind of density, because there needs to be a certain amount of usable space, open space, to offset the units. So the beauty of the district plan, as I know there's a desire for more density, there's a desire for apartments. By using a district plan, you can achieve that, where you can't achieve that under your current zoning code. Under your current code, the only thing you could really ever do there would be single family residential subdivision, and there's just not enough density to even make it economical for people to do that. So you see that in the bulk requirements. I'll just highlight 2 things. There's a 6-story maximum. So it is anticipated that there will be multiple apartment towers, which this district plan will allow for. You see there's 2 different lot area allotments. We know there's a desire from the board to have some mixed use, to have some retail. So that is encouraged in the lot area. So you can have pads or coffee shop or something like that. But then we kept your 2-acre minimum lot requirement for residential, because we know you don't want single family subdivisions in the future. So that's meant to reflect the input we've gotten from the board. Parking, there's a desire, the desire has been expressed to us through the planning process that don't want to see any more parking than you have to be. So we've implemented some creative solutions here. This parking system, the equation, requires less parking places than your overall, it's part of it. But then in addition to that, it would allow the developer to bank up to 25% of the required parking to see if it's necessary. And if it's not necessary, then we go to site plan approval like any other project and get approved to have a parking lot that's X size. We wouldn't have to build all of it at first and see if it works. This is a new housing pattern, new development pattern. I know you've been working on your comprehensive plan, and there's a desire, to have less parking dominated communities. I'd also highlight that recreational areas are a huge part of this interconnection with walking trails, having it be accessible for pedestrians from Burdick through Burdick, potentially, hopefully someday into the village. Be a great interconnect and a good place particularly for residents, but also for people in the community that don't live in that apartment structure. Will be an excellent open space. Another component of the project is workforce housing. 5% of the units in the project would be set aside for reduced rent under the workforce housing component of the district plan. There's a lot of detail. What we did is we went into the HUD regulations and we borrowed the structure. We didn't want to give you anything wonky or novel. We followed very closely the federal pattern without getting into the weeds. You look at the area median income for the metro area, you reduce it by a factor here, it's 80% of that, and then housing costs can't exceed 30% for that. Now, it's not anticipated here. It's not like we're going to have one set of housing for workforce housing and then nicer apartments for market. There's going to be the same apartments. It's just they're going to set aside 5% of them for that. There's also an income ceiling for those apartments so that the people who need them most will have access to that housing. The mixed use set aside is 2,500 square feet. That will be offered for non-residential purposes, as our understanding from the boards is desire there to do that. And then on the sustainability front, There'll be 10 charging plugs for electric vehicles in the parking lot. Actually, there'll be a lot of parking underground. It might be underground, might be in the open lot, either way. So I will stop there. Are there any questions about what I just said? Yes.
So back to the workforce housing. You have a lot of great detail here, but there's still a lot more detail that should be filled in here. Such as, what happens if a person's income goes down after occupancy in the unit, what happens at the end of 10 years to the person's rent, because you can't just jack it up the next day to what the market rate is. And, how are the rents going to be set? Are they gonna be set by the bedroom size or like, things like that? So I was discussing this with the other board members, and there's going to be potential to be sending over an appendix, just defining it more of this information in detail, so we know how it's going to be working out based off of the HUD regulations. And here, just so it's a little more clear, and as you said, housing costs, total housing costs in there for the rent. So that would also have to include the utility amounts in there, not phone, internet, or cable, but electric. In that aspect of there, so it's just, I mean, I'm happy to work with you on it and everything to try to come up with the right resolution for this, and also. AMIs can go down every size in some years, so something putting language in there that they would never go down, would like a whole harmless kind of thing for you, so you guys don't. End up in a situation where, oh, the income limit went down, now I have to charge less rent for this apartment. So your in-year rent would be held harmless, and it would never go down, it would only go up when the annual median incomes go up. So as you can tell, I work in affordable housing.
Yeah.
So just things like that, because it would protect the unit as for your budgeting purposes, and also protected the tenants in there, so I've done. Day 10 years in one day, because all of a sudden they're not jacking up to the highest, plus. There's New York laws and things that say you can only raise rents a certain amount each year. For that, so you couldn't just double them, just to have a little bit more clarity on that side of things.
So on the first, I think those are great questions. For the first part of your question, there was an effort in paragraph 4 to deal with people who income out. And just for the benefit of the board, we're talking about is sometimes people come in and they meet the income threshold and then their life changes, they begin earning more money. It's a perverse outcome to then evict that person from their home.
Right.
So
That
in
part, but the income going down part was what I had said.
You mean like the AMI going down?
No, like
If you're renting
their
at full
household
rate.
income goes down. Those types of things, so like, are you having a fixed rent, or are you actually just basing on 30% of their income?
it's 30, so it's 30% not of the individual's income, but of 80% of the AMI.
Okay, so you're gonna be doing it based off of the AMI, so for
Right.
right now, one person is $52,300, so it would be 1308, basically.
Yeah, I think the AMI for like a household income and it changes, it changes every, it adjusts every year, but it's around whatever, 65,000, 62,000.
So basically just to have all that stuff tidied up and everything.
So that's one,
Dependence,
yeah, so that's 30%.
right, but for one bedroom, you can have one person in it or two people in it, so we're gonna be charging them. Because a 2-person income AMI is higher than that, that's 59,750.
This
So one
this
bedroom could be,
contemplates by household, so you take the household income,
so one
the
bedroom could be
metro
more.
area. The
So
household
one
income
bedroom
from
could be more, if one person's in it or two people are in it.
right, it's household income from the metro area. 80% of that can't exceed 30% of that.
That's gonna be hard for your budgeting purposes then, because you can, someone can move into a one bedroom with two people, and then obviously your rent's gonna be almost $1,500, and one of them could move out, and then shopping down to $1,300.
Yeah, so right now, what we have is, it's market based, it's not based on the individual's income or the apartment square footage. It's based on the federal regulations where you take the AMI for the whole region. And then you pick a percentage for the household income. And we hadn't planned on varying it by apartments, right?
So I think,
They're gonna be the same apartments.
I don't think the intent is necessarily to challenge what's here, but to add clarity.
Yeah.
Well, just so that we know, you guys know the rules, we know the rules. Exactly, and I think that the goal is not to push back on how it is presented, it's just additional clarity.
Right. Just
Right,
additional
so I'm just trying to answer it. So I think some of your questions are answered, and some of them aren't, I guess. So what I'm saying is there is a provision to prevent people from losing their home if the income goes up. And if that happens, then the next available apartment, because we still got to stay at 5%. That is vacant, whatever apartment it is, would then have to be offered at the workforce housing rate. And we wouldn't be evicting people because they make too much money. So that, I think, was one part of your question. I get the other, that's not your whole question. That I know in some systems, there's very complicated matrices where the rent is different depending on how many people in your household and how many bedrooms are in the apartment, things like that. We didn't do that. We thought simple was better. You're right, it could cause some budgeting, challenges for us, but we're willing to take those on to keep it as transparent as possible and to avoid some of that complications, if that makes sense.
So are you saying if one person moves in with $40,000 of income, they'll just pay 30% of $40,000?
No, it's 30% of 80% of the AMI.
So they have to make 80%, they can't make less.
No, they can make less. So you take the AMI for the metro area. And so I'm gonna make up a pretend number for
So they're
TC,
paying 30% of AMI regardless of what they do.
the rent.
Okay.
So imagine AMI is
So
100
that's
units.
simpler.
Yeah,
I got it.
it's way simpler than what you're talking about. Yeah, the AMI is 100 units. So then 1 year, so 100 is the AMI for the metro. And then you would take 80% of that. So 80 units would be the number. We would then take 30% of that. So 30% of 80 units, is 8 times 3 is 24. So the rent would be 24. It doesn't matter how much the person makes. It's set by the AMI that HUD puts out every year.
But then they're not paying 30% of their income towards.
They're not paying 30% of their income. They may be getting a deal.
Yeah, the benchmark, it's not individualized.
It's set by market.
It's not low income housing. It's the benchmark.
So it is gonna be it's gonna be fixed rents.
And that is once
Yes.
you.
That's what I was-
If somebody makes more money,
Fixed rents or
Yeah.
income-based rents.
Yeah.
if somebody makes more money, we're
That
not
does
gonna charge them
clarify.
more rent.
That does clarify, it's fixed rents, not actually any, so that does
100%.
clarify.
Yeah, if someone's income goes up, we're not gonna increase their rent. The only reason I was bringing up the income change before is because you get bounced out of this if you make too much money. So, that's just to assure you that we're not gonna cheat. We're not gonna have a bunch of people who used to be low income and aren't anymore and count them as workforce housing. When somebody incomes out, we're gonna open up the next unit to satisfy that 5%.
And that was, I will say, that was a large part of that conversation, was to make sure that just by, trying to meet some threshold of affordable housing, workforce housing, that we weren't playing essentially a shell game, that the goal was the agreement will state so many units would be set at that rate, and there would be some, small bumps as people would earn more money. But the goal would be that for those 10 years, you would have that many units set aside.
So it's a one size fits all. I think some people will really benefit for that, but I think the simplicity of it, the transparency of it, is a benefit from our point of view. And I think from the community's point of view that we're willing to deal with that. Yeah.
Well, but so we're gonna still trying to work that out into the county, so it's more clear for the residents trying to come in, because as we just discussed, you and I understand that not everyone's gonna understand the whole rent structure fee.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, I would think, after the fact, like guidance documents, like we could do a guidance document with like a sample calculation, because AMI will change a little bit
Mhm.
from year to year, saying under the 2023 AMI, this is what the rent's gonna be. And that's it. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah.
So, as the AMI changes, the math will change a little bit. That's why I couldn't put a
Right,
rent
right.
number in here. But that's only because AMI varies, not because it won't be dependent on an individual's income. It won't be dependent on the size of an apartment.
The only thing I would recommend adding in here, because I also run unfunded affordable housing programs.
Yeah.
Is somewhere in the section, it's just because one of the problems is the income verification that's required on
Yes.
an ongoing basis. It's just something, how that would be done. So they sign a lease on June 25th. And what is the predetermined frequency of when that qualification for that workforce housing unit is reevaluated on a monthly basis, on a 6-month basis, is it annually? When should a tenant expect to know things might change?
Right.
And
Yeah,
it's
that's a
okay,
good
when might the property holder know when things might change?
And how are they gonna?
So what we did include is in paragraph 5, that we must provide information. So it's like an audit, it's a check to the town codes office on an annual basis. But the district plan doesn't get into the details of how we obtain that information from the residents.
No, like,
So
would
we'll have
that
to work that out.
normally be included in a district plan? Like, that seems to be kind of getting into the weeds.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not recommending you put your lease agreement in it.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's.
Yeah.
You can put something in that, after or in order to approve this, there would be a guidance document. that
And
would
we'd be happy to
Yeah.
agree to
So
provide additional information,
think
but probably, you're right, probably doesn't like need to be in a zoning.
Probably,
Yeah.
what we'll do is we'll
Yeah.
connect and just make sure that we've got our concerns addressed, and then what we'll do is whether, like we said, having an appendix that would live with a document like this, or there would be some commitment to a guidance document, something like that. But I think the assurances that you two are looking for, we can definitely find a way to work.
My interest here is suggesting this to have a successful project, because there's an operating of sites, it is a hangup that happens all the time. How did you verify this person's eligibility for this great program? Or for this great,
But they're not doing it.
they're not, but I'm saying you're putting in your plan what you're going to do and have a mechanism to illustrate how you're gonna verify you're doing what you say you're gonna do. With a
Yeah.
frequency.
I think it would make sense to have side letters, where we can communicate that with you, just because this is literally gonna be codified and put in your code. I don't know if you want to attach appendices
No.
about some of the details, because it's gonna be
I
in
think
your
it's
town
more
code.
code.
But we'd be happy to have like side letters, and we'll spitball as much as you want, but we do need this to be codified before we get into that.
Do we have in our codes any information on how we regulate or track affordable housing? So that would make sense to me, having it in the codes. It feels like we're, not that I don't care about these things, but it feels like we're splitting hairs a little bit as it relates to the PUD.
We're just letting them know that we're gonna be expecting these types of things.
Yeah, but we also said that it wasn't in there, and why wasn't it in there? I just think, I just think that it shouldn't be in there. I appreciate the questions and I would be interested in the answers and just don't think it's long from PUD.
I just had a question, because the workforce housing would be available for a period of time, 10 years, is that just for like the residents who live there, or is it just like 10 years from when we approve the district plan?
The way that it's written now, for 10 years after the approval of the district plan, we have to keep that 5% workforce housing.
So after 10 years, that 5% expires.
Well, yes, so
Yeah.
it's 10 years following the issuance of a certificate of occupancy.
Once it gets built,
Yeah,
yeah.
so when it's,
Not from today.
once it's
Yeah,
built,
Yeah, yeah.
it's there, they
Then
also.
we're building affordable housing and then taking it away. Intentionally. That's concerning to me.
Tax law with the housing tax credit program does only go for 10 years for the tax credits and 15 years too, but typically the other funders in the program where you get it from, they do add on additional years for the affordability of it, but 10 to 15 years is the regulations.
So then what happens after 10 years?
Hopefully by that time, we'll work with the other developers, the more affordable housing, but also we will have.
But they see the benefit of it.
I can give you some background how we got to the number, that would be helpful. So the 10 years is what like the IDA uses, for all pilot agreements and everything in the county. And so that's sort of your standard planning from a financial tax, all those sort of things. Now, could it be 9 or 11? Sure, and we're not really against that, but forever is a long time, so there has to be some sort of threshold there, because just when you're doing construction, the life of the project isn't infinite, the life of the building isn't infinite, things like that.
So I guess my confusion is, and I'm just gonna bring, Syracuse just went through a rezoning process, and they just approved 20 more units, and they will require 10% of affordable housing, but there's no deadline, there's no like expiration date for it, I know. It's in our code. So that's just my question.
They're not building affordable housing,
Okay,
they're building housing.
okay.
They're going to make some of the units in the building affordable
For 10 years.
for 10 years.
Doesn't feel right. Is there a way to make it longer, like we say 15, 20?
I don't really have authority right now to say that.
But like.
But I,
yeah,
if you wanted 11, I'm sure I can make it happen.
I think following the conversation,
Yes.
following the comprehensive plan too.
Yeah.
The goal here is out in the suburbs, outside of the city of Syracuse. To try a project and see, you know, this is a way that we can work with developers who want to build a successful project. While also getting the things that our community is looking for, like affordable housing. And, you know, I think a reminder that, you know, by working on a district plan like this, we are getting, before we talk about sustainability, the recreation areas, the workforce housing, we are getting denser housing. That inherently, we're adding housing stock to the market. We know that there is a shortage. Hopefully, that has some, by building such a dense, you know, we are already building more housing than we could build in any other zone within the town. We know that dense housing helps us meet our sustainability goals. And just by the fact that it is dense and you don't have a half of an acre, even a quarter of an acre of a yard and a driveway and a separate roof and all these things. This is inherently more affordable than what our zoning code allows. So the goal here was really, by getting more density, we are already meeting a lot of what we have been tasked by the comprehensive plan to meet. And I will say, when we started the conversations, we said, we're gonna need, we want you to build the density, but we're also gonna need this. And they were able to figure out how to make it work with this site. And then, I think something that I think you might have actually skipped over was everything is going to be utilized. That's where I think, that's where I kind of wanted to frame this as, this is not a typical situation where it's, I need a zone change, and then I can do whatever is in that zone. We have already gone back and forth. I will say, the applicants have been very easy to work with. We've had a lot of really productive conversations. And it's important to remember that a project like this will be unique outside of the city of Syracuse. Even considering the city of Syracuse, the amount of housing we'll be building with some affordable offset, and it's all built sustainably with the community goals in mind. This is, now that we've spent all that time with the comprehensive plan, this is an opportunity to say, we've been given a mandate by the town by adopting that comprehensive plan. And I would argue that this meets a lot of those goals. Could the numbers be bigger for affordable housing, workforce housing? Absolutely. But this is a partnership with private developers to help us meet our goals and for them to meet their financial.
So the other thing too is that number 3 says the town board can reduce the number of representatives. Like it's already expired in 10 years. Do we really need the provision there that town board can reduce it? When it's expired.
So that's just your authority. That's nothing that we can exercise. It'd just be authority that you would have in the event that the world changes and.
Well, the world changing is, I think, what we're worried.
Yeah. If the world changes and this no longer works, you have a safety valve. I would hate to take that authority away from you, but yeah.
No, I think,
Is there, have we discussed, and my apologies, this is just me forgetting, have we discussed what the rents are going to be for the unit?
No, I don't think we've had numbers on that yet. It's hard. It would be hard to speculate at this point because we don't know what our taxes are gonna be. We don't know if there's gonna be a pilot. We don't know, you know what I mean? So the economic components of it, we're talking to investors now. We don't know the day that we borrow the money to build it. We don't know what the interest rates are gonna be.
Okay.
So it's a little hard to say with certainty right now, and I wouldn't want to mislead you.
No, that's okay. I just wondered if we knew that, and I just was, I've been looking for it in the document and in my previous documents, I wasn't finding it, so I didn't know if I wasn't seeing that. Because that would, it's not going to be luxury housing where the rents are going to be astronomical and where you're catering to a certain demographic, like it'll be, we'll have the work for housing, but then generally speaking, these units will be affordable for everyday people. Yeah.
It'll be market, and the other way to think of it, I'm glad you asked that question, because right now our concept plans anticipate adding 350 units. It's sort of unique. It's a different situation than like I go in the city and I pitch an apartment building. And if they don't give it to my developer, somebody else will build apartments there. Right now, this is zoned in such a way that nothing can be built there, right? So it's zero. So it's not like us or the next guy, it's zero,
Yeah,
right? So, you know, you very wisely created a new law, created a mechanism where you could create 350 units from nothing. And that's gonna move the market, and that's gonna help everybody who runs the market.
As
That's interesting, I hadn't thought of that, that's.
as a aside to the board, think about how many parcels there are in home building. Okay, I think it's what, 400, 500, maybe somewhere in there. We would be talking about bringing out, you know, exactly, in such a small area that, I mean, the amount of housing, I think is actually hard to wrap your head
Yeah,
around
it's cool.
that you would be adding to this project.
And the thing that's neat about this site too, is it's not gonna ruin anybody's life. It's not like it's next to any single family residential. It's surrounded by, you know, woods and lakes and Burdick Street and this nursing home across the street. A lot of times when I do a lot of this kind of work, both sides, and when you're trying to build an apartment area, there's invariably gonna be like a neighborhood that comes out against it.
Yeah.
It's a neighborhood, right? Like if there's ever a place to do this, you want density, but you don't want to ruin neighborhoods, this is the spot.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a great project.
Any other questions? I know, we've got a little bit.
I think it's.
Okay. Great.
And I have copies of the map if anybody is now.
Thank you. So again, Brian Bouchard with CHA Consulting, project engineer. As Brody described, what we're going through was really the district language that will provide the requirements on how to develop this project. So one of the requirements in the district plan is to provide you with a district map that shows generally what the use areas will be. And even more generally, just basically what the boundary of this district will be, which is the parcel that we have under contract. This is all understanding that there is obviously a very detailed process after the adoption of the district plan, wherein we will continue to refine the site plan process with the planning board, detailed grading, drainage, the exact number of units that can physically fit on the site and the constructability of roads, et cetera. So what this district plan shows here, just to orient you and the public, is that we would be providing a new public roadway directly adjacent to the town center retirement community, which is the Northeast Medical Center driveway off Burdick Street. And that town road would start to come into the site. And the first stop really, as you enter the site, is what we've designated as that mixed use area. So there's a variety of uses within the mixed use area, but what it contemplates is basically some type of commercial, retail, restaurant use on a ground floor type unit, similar to town center, with the upper floors being residential, right? So then as you go further back into the roadway here, sort of both sides of that road would be sort of this residential use area. Along the pond side would be smaller 6-unit style apartments that kind of border that pond and can overlook the pond. And then on the north side of the road, where there's a very large developable area, would be sort of those higher density residential buildings, wherein what we contemplate currently is having a podium level for garage parking, which is certainly an amenity, not otherwise available to, like, you know, smaller apartment buildings. So having a parking garage, and then those upper floors would be the residential units. There's some fairly challenging grading, but as you come further down, there is a small pocket of land that would also support some type of smaller, similar apartment building, perhaps with not necessarily a full podium, but perhaps garage entries on the ends, and then having residential units in that. What's shown in the green is really what's left over, which is the primary feature of this area, which is the south pond, right? So this is very underutilized, an old quarry, hardly noticeable, at least during the summer, because of foliage along North Burdick. You can kind of see into it during the summer once the leaves fall. But everything in green would essentially be what's difficult to develop with buildings. So this would be our opportunity for recreation, sort of clean up that pond area. To the north side of the pond, we would also envision something like a clubhouse, which would be our amenity space, so that it directly overlooks the pond and can sort of have sort of an engagement with the pond in terms of a dock space and recreation. And then some of the areas around the outside that we can create walking trails, et cetera. So as one of the board members said, this is really sort of a community in and of itself, but on a much smaller footprint. And one of the advantages as well is walkability, right? Our adjacency to the existing trail network, the ability for residents to be able to walk a very short distance just to go to town center and get groceries or something like that. So the location's perfect. Certainly matches, as you said, what the comprehensive plan looks like. And again, this is just generically following what is the written language of the district in terms of a map form, which will be further refined in terms of the site plan process with detailed building elevations and grading and drainage, et cetera. So.
So my main concern here is that it's still showing gravel driveway and it's a road that loops around the property.
Yes.
And so I'm like, we need to finish road.
Certainly. So our intent is to provide that town right of way through the property that we have under contract. We are current, and obviously we're purchasing it from the owner that owns the aggregate parcel currently. And we are still working with that owner to make sure that the town roadway and right of way that would be dedicated would be in a position that will accept a future development of his parcel to the south. What we would do is obviously construct the road to our property line, but if there is no formal development plans for that property to the south, which is primarily, I think, plans, you know, at least what has been talked about with the planning board as more of a commercial type use. We wouldn't want to finalize that roadway and implicate the ability to develop that parcel, but we will be filing the intent would be to file the right of way and then provide that continuation for emergency access during the interim until a time when it's developed and can be fully paved and create the loop.
It's a different owner.
It's a different.
Yeah, it's a different owner, so we want to.
Yes, well, the part that we control will be a finished road. For now, the part that we don't control, we'll construct a gravel road on somebody else's land to make sure there's two access points for fire safety. We anticipate that parcel south will be developed, but we can't dictate where the finished road will be because we're not developing.
So the gravel driveway would only be, the only part that needed to the town would be the finished road.
Correct.
But I still don't think that it's just a dead end.
That is, other parts, there are various stages of development that they're working on.
We don't know where they're gonna want their road, because we don't know what they're gonna build.
Yeah,
What was that?
that's,
Right.
This would not be dissimilar to creating a very large subdivision plan with 400 homes where you phased it in sort of 4 quadrants, whereas you as the owner, own 100 acres and you would develop the first section and you would deed and dedicate those town right of ways. But you would also have the contemplation of what the roadway network would look like. But at a point in time when you develop the first phase, you would dedicate that right of way, you would provide temporary cul-de-sac turns so that it can function during a time when you're then building the subsequent phases. So very similar to that, just a little bit smaller scale.
Gave up just last week.
Yeah.
Was the turnaround for a dead end, it was a village during construction, so yeah, that's a normal. So we're just talking shores.
Yeah.
Oh.
And that, just start calling it like something.
So it's.
No.
Can we get 20 charging stations instead of 10?
I had on my thing saying solar, not or even over the parking, but at the same time, yeah,
The building.
no, but. There's still parking lot there.
Yeah, people consider, possibly.
Yeah, so there's a variety, right? Like the small sort of 6-unit apartment buildings would look very similar to a townhome where you would have a private garage off of the public street and it would kind of look like an apartment townhome. The bigger buildings would have an enclosed garage, like a podium level. The grading works out where it would sort of be a basement on one side and then facing the pond, it would be sort of more residential feel facing the street. And then there would be both surface parking, but also detached garages around the perimeter, I think is what we've talked about with Charlie, so that there's sort of different options in terms of the parking. And then obviously working with the town to make sure that the impervious area isn't excessive so that we can land bank parking to the needs of the parking and be able to implement that as a project.
I really like that.
It really does.
Town of DeWitt does that and it's very successful because sometimes uses don't need parking, especially with a business, but then a new business may come in that does need more parking, but it's already shown on the map, approved by the town and needs to be used if it's
You
required.
have a plan.
Yes.
So you don't need it.
Yeah, it's graded, it's available, it just says that it no need to construct it until a point when it's needed.
So what I would ask the board to consider would be to understand the conversation that's been had, understanding that there's a little bit more we wanna try to find a way to codify as much as possible, the rules of the workforce housing. I would be looking to the board for motions to move these as recommendations to both our planning board and the other county planning board. That way we could start that process and get some feedback from the folks that are gonna be doing the site plan review from Manlius County. I mean, I am hopeful, especially considering our comprehensive plan and the county's plan, that we'll get a pretty strong recommendation from county planning. But that's, I would, if possible, if people are interested, I think that would be a good next step, keep us moving along. While we continue to have conversations about, you know.
Because the same version of us.
Exactly, yeah.
I'll make a motion to refer the community request made by Twin Towns Housing for the project known as Twin Towns for the parcel located at 5440 Burdick Street to the town of Manlius Planning Board and the County Planning Board.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, opposed, okay, so that would be.
I'll just report as of the meeting, but not.
Hi,
And
everybody.
then-
Hi, it's Heather. I just wanted to, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say that I understand that tonight is not a night I can vote as I'm on vacation. But I'm listening in and I just wanted to express my support for this motion as well, that I'm really glad we're moving forward.
So, you know, obviously, as you know, the recommendation is time. I would be asking folks to start considering about hearing dates, so we can start getting that on the agenda. Just so that folks, ideally, we have as much planning as possible, but I think at this point.
We're gonna wait to hear back from the,
Okay.
this will want to know what their feedback is.
Yeah.
When is the plan board meeting next?
Yeah.
We still have to hear back from the county planning board, and so their deadline is Friday of next week. I'm guessing, without getting it from me, it's gonna be at least 3 weeks before we even, 3 or 4 weeks before you can hear back from the county planning board.
So we'll look at the calendar and
So
start.
it'll be sometime in September.
This will be because possible.
I'm sorry, say that again?
When is our town planning?
I think it's 28.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So we need ready probably by the 13th to schedule.
Do you think we'd have time to review the county planning feedback by then?
Yeah, right, so today, it looks like September 27th. That's fine.
So we would set the first and the public hearing would have to be. The 13th is my daughter's 10th birthday, so we could keep that meeting short.
Okay, well, thank you very much, really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay. So next up on the agenda, we have the Garden Park Theater Apartments for another planned unit development request. I don't believe they're online. Did they let us know they would be here?
No, I communicated with the applicant. They know
Okay.
coming out tonight, so.
Okay, so we will table that presentation for now. Okay. So moving right along. We have a cemetery budget line item. This is in response to us moving from using outside contractor. To mow cemeteries to using the highway department employees, and so.
I would like to make a motion to create an expenditure account of A00.5.8810.100 personnel services. For the highway people who already mow the protection basins to also mow cemeteries. And that would be required and also a motion.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, carries.
And then in order to do that, I'd like to approve the budget transfer amount of, get this, $495,000 from A00.5.8810.400 cemeteries contractual to A00.5.8810.100 cemeteries and personal service. I'm glad I heard that. I'll go ahead and second that one.
Yeah, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
There's our new controller, I mean. So you wanna check to see if the garden department emailed us that maybe they're actually.
I have my email open and I don't see anything.
Okay,
So I did just,
but I was just looking forward to that.
Okay, so next up, we have the United Group Medicare Advantage Plan Renewal. I would look to, or have another deputy town manager, maybe a little. What's going on? What's the?
After the retirees for the town of Manlius, recently began participating in a Medicare Advantage plan. And this is the renewal for the upcoming year. So it's a 4%, 6% overall increase, but it breaks down to maybe $2 or $3 a month for retirees on average.
I think still more than $6.
Yeah, and this is following we adopt this plan, a pretty significant savings for our.
Correct, yes. So we'll still, town will still realize, good savings on this.
And so will retirees.
Yes, yes. So recommendation would be to, approve this going forward for 2024.
So there's around your insurance.
Oh, we're getting there.
Okay.
Let's see across the line.
Is this for all town retirees, just for police retirees? All of them.
Over 65.
Medicare eligible.
Yes. So motion to authorize the supervisor to sign the 2024 United Group Medicare Advantage Plan renewal. All again.
Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. And. Okay, so the petition for permission referendum to establish a ward district. Dr. Butler, we're going to-
Yes, as everyone knows, I spent a great deal of time doing that with our attorneys. I did accept petitions and submitted a very detailed letter regarding that. So last time I'm going to make sure that we spoke about that and that, you know, it was acknowledged publicly that we accepted those. So I believe that my part of this is now over and that I will now turn this over to you guys.
So I'll just talk a little bit and then let me know if I'm off base. But basically where we're at is the petition was filed with town clerk. She followed Article 6 of town law and subscribed and authenticated it, according to the rules for nominating petition as for election law. And now the law states that the town board shall hold a special election within 60 to 75 days. For me, that petition is filed. Not from the decision, but from when it's filed. I know I've been talking to Attorney Kardasky and quite a few people about trying to understand how we go about running a special election. I believe, we're gonna need a little bit more time to figure out the exact date, and then we have to work with the Board of Elections. If they are willing to offer us a little help with machines, we are on the hook for finding and employing the poll inspectors for the day of the election. State law requires, or town law requires us to pick at least an 8-hour continuous period between the hours of 8 AM and 8 PM on any given day to hold the election. The default polling place is the town hall here. We have a number of options that need to be considered and discussed, but we can seek out additional polling places. We can extend the hours past that 8 hours. Understanding additional polling places will incur additional costs, and require available polling inspectors. As a reminder, polling inspectors are normally expecting 2 days or more training, obviously, but generally 2 action days for them. So we do have to kind of pull that list of eligible inspectors. In addition, the law does outline an option for the town board to set up a board of registers, which would be polling inspectors as per the Board of Elections, who could serve on the board of registers, that we paid for that. And that what that does is it would make it so that they would hold public meetings essentially in a public space, like this room right here. And if we go that route, one of the upsides is that folks that aren't going to be in town for the day of the election will be able to apply for absentee ballots. So if we don't do the board of registers, the only way to vote is to be in town on the day of the election and cast your ballot that day. So no early voting, no absentee voting. And so to consider, this election is gonna happen in the second half of September. That means without absentee ballots, anybody who is out of town for a vacation, anybody who has returned to school, anybody that doesn't have reliable transportation, in addition to anybody that would normally use a medical absentee ballot, and that can't find a way, whether they are physically unable or unable to arrange something to get to a polling place on that day, will not be able to vote. So the board of registers, the downside, I would argue, is that if we do the board of registers to enable absentee ballots, understanding that you do still need to appear before the board of registers to apply for the absentee ballot, you still have to be in town for that day. If we do the board of registers, every person who intends to vote will have to register with the board of registers prior to election day. That means rather than asking folks to come to town hall and or another place, they would have to come twice.
And they're gonna come on voting day to vote, and be told they can't vote.
Yes,
Which
we would
is
have a number.
outrageous.
So,
I would not be in favor of that.
so that being said, another thing to consider is that this is not based off of voter registration status. Everybody who shows up on the day of the special election, if we don't do the board of registers, will have to show identification, prove that they are an elector of the town of Manlius, and then pass it out.
So a number of people aren't gonna be able to vote in a special election if we do the board of registration, or if we don't do the board of registration.
Yeah, the way that
So
the
major voter suppression.
well, the rules, the law that states how a
But
special
for
election.
more people to be represented, major voter suppression is happening.
So the way the law dictates holding a special election, these are our options. We do not, just to be clear, we do not have the option of moving this to the November ballot. The petition was filed at such a date that we are mandated to hold a special election. Had the petition been filed later, within 65 and 75 days of the election, of the biennial town election, there was a possibility that it could appear on the November ballot, but even that is up for debate, whether or not it could have actually appeared on that ballot.
So we did just approve a historic comprehensive plan for the town, which included this provision of exploring this option, which would have really been a useful time to date to explore all these contingencies that are no one is aware of. You know, this, I'm sure this wasn't the intention of the individuals who triggered this event. And yet here we are, having to make these very abrupt moves in a 4-week period.
And we're hurtling towards the state.
In
even
the
now.
interests of transparency and representation, something doesn't fit. So, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, well, we're gonna they have to show identification, what does that mean?
And then what if they run
That's
it
not
for
what
the-
Yes, so we don't know, that's why we are unable to set a date right now, this night. These are all questions that we're gonna work with our attorney, likely the Association of Towns will be asking for quite a bit of information. And we will be trying to coordinate as much as we are allowed to with the Board of Elections, but the Board of Elections is not allowed to run this election.
How much do you think this might cost us and taxpayers?
We don't know, I don't know what the going rate for a poll inspector is. How many necessarily we need, how many polling places we'll have, I mean, all of these things need to be figured out in the.
Do we know how much it's cost us already, how much time and energy Congress representative put into this already, that she hasn't been able to devote to doing her actual job duties?
And to William's point, we could have been having like so many people spoke at over podium and expressed how frustrated they and their neighbors are with the fact that they still don't know the information, we don't know the information, so we can't give it to them. We could have taken so much time
We
and
spent
had
actually,
this conversation.
we spent a good amount of time, listening to the public on the comprehensive plan itself, and one of the resounding comments that came through that process was,
there's a lot in this plan, a lot of big stuff. You really need to slow down and take your time and really be ample and mindful about implementation items here. This is not that.
No, it seems very rushed that we have to just make a decision on changing our whole entire town government.
So let me add a few other things, the effect, if the proposition is passed at the special election. Currently, the board of elections would be charged with drawing those maps. When those maps are adopted or accepted. That date is very important, because if that happens in a reasonable time frame, every single town councilor, even those elected at this next election, would have their terms terminated at the end of 2025.
And all of this is taking place without a real discussion of the merits of the proposed system.
Correct.
So we would adopt those maps,
No.
So the Board of Elections would actually draw the wards. Once those wards were drawn and they were filed with the town clerk, with the county clerk, and with the Board of Elections, then the ward would then be established.
So
So there's no time frame.
there's no public input, there's no.
The Board of Elections, the two commissioners of the Board of Elections.
So they're elected, so they're.
No, they're not.
They're not. What? So no, so yeah, so there's no representative.
So there is.
Of course, elected.
So again, part of the conversation too is determining, are there abilities for us to enact some type of citizen-led redistricting initiative? Again, we just spent a significant amount of time coming to this first determination, and now we are switching to, okay, let's learn more. We were asking a question of, are these petitions valid? We now have an answer. They have been accepted, and now we begin the work of saying, how do we hold a special?
I looked up how many registered voters are in the town of Manlius currently as of June, and it's over 25,000. And we're talking about potentially one polling place.
And I will say, and town clerk Weber, correct me if I'm wrong, but we received advice from the Association of Towns that we should not do a mailing to inform residents of this.
I was advocating for a mailing just because we do mail things out to people when we change zoning and do things like that, and that is a function of our office. So I asked that question, I was advised that we cannot do a mailing, because if we miss one person, that could be considered, I don't want to say voter suppression, but that's kind of the word she used, so.
We can't even tell our residents that this election is happening via mail.
So the one thing that we will have to do is we're gonna do all of the normal public notice requirements. So there's a lot of information, very clear information surrounding that. There'll be a resolution before the town board. We will then publish something in the paper. I'll put it on the website. You know, we will do as much as we can in the channels that are public facing that people have access to. But in terms of me sending a letter directly to residents, they said that we cannot do that, because if we even miss one, that's a problem.
It would be the control's office wouldn't have a problem with that type of expense. Probably, as long as the notice was not advocating one way or the other. From a legal standpoint. You open yourself up to exposure from somebody who didn't get the mailing, and somebody else did get the mailing, and they would claim that it's unfair that they didn't know about the election when somebody else
Well,
did.
and I think the harder part too is, in a normal circumstance, the Board of Elections knows who's registered to vote and informs that.
Right.
We do not have a list of registered voters. We also do not have a list of every person who lives in town of Manlius. So it would be impossible for us to actually mail each elected. We could send a letter. Parcel.
We don't
Even then.
I mean, that's how I typically handle it. I don't put people's names on it in case someone's moved. You are entitled to that notification because of your location and not necessarily who's there. So I just say resident, and that would likely be how I would have handled it.
Yeah, but I think it's not worth the risk, because I think we miss one house.
Yeah.
And there's no way we don't.
And when I do mailings, they regularly get returned.
Okay.
So that is a,
Well, when you look at the tax office, the return mail that she gets. Yeah.
So it seems like a very calculated move by people turning in these petitions. And I do echo a lot of the concerns that we heard at this open podium, especially since the people who sign and witness these petitions attend our board meetings regularly. And do stand at this open podium and speak at every single meeting, except at the last one meetings where this was on our agenda. They did not speak at these meetings, which I find very telling. I don't, honestly, this is a very confusing thing going on right now. And
So-
like, I don't know how we tend to get the word out about the special elections we can't mail.
Well,
And make
so,
sure that
to
everyone
be
can
clear,
hear
the law does not require us to do any notification outside of what we would
Yeah.
publish, if we're passing a resolution. All the legal requirements for notification are around that resolution.
But that's going to be not, no insult intended on most people not in the legals.
So it's not hard for me, here's how tiny.
But we'll have to work with media, we'll have to make sure that we're posting on social and just.
And
spread the word.
that's definitely not like our residents to spread the word, please.
That's where you don't know nothing for that purpose.
So,
So I guess I would like to suggest that we now that we seek legal counsel with somebody with election expertise, which is another expense. But that we need to set this up correctly because we don't want to get sued later because we didn't set it up right because we didn't know what we're doing. So I would like to.
That's another concern too.
I want to make sure that we have some
I think,
guidance.
I think as a. Backstop, we have the Association of Towns to refer to, they would imagine are the experts, as far as experts
And
go.
I'm sure that our attorney has access to experts.
Yeah, first of all. This is a very unique
Yes.
area of law. There's probably two people in the state of New York. That sit in this room tonight, that have more information than we do on this. I mean, so,
So you're the expert.
I wasn't a month ago. I didn't know this thing existed, so, but. I appreciate that, and we'll certainly do what it wants. Running a special election is not that, so we could figure that out. Like that, yeah, well, and it's gonna take, them. We spent a lot of time over the last 3 weeks, we're gonna have to spend a lot of time over the next 2 weeks to under the it. And if we do need special activities, I will reach out and make sure we get it.
So, the key takeaways is we will be disenfranchising pretty significant portion of town, regardless of what our solution is. People will not be able to vote in this election,
A lot of people,
so.
elderly,
we want to-
disabled, college students.
People
Yeah.
like work
Yes.
hours.
Can you imagine what your boss saying, I needed a day out, I have to go vote?
Yeah, that'll be fun too. I mean, maybe we'll have to do like no, there is actually an election in Manlius.
Yes. You never know where I'm working.
Yeah.
I'm going to have-
Well, and I would also see all the people who didn't know about it. Right.
Yeah.
It's just an outrage, frankly. I don't know that I've ever felt angry in a town board meeting. I just felt very angry. This is the new kind of.
Alright, so any further questions? I think we have a lot of questions, obviously, so we'll continue to. Find
Another
the
question, go to your head.
now.
There's no motion
Now,
that-
it has to be, a decision, there will have to be made about the registration committee. The date for this federal election. Determining how many polling places, more than one. And also, who's going to man the polling places and what expenses are gonna come.
So we need to talk with BOE as far as how they can arrange that.
Yeah, they have a list of.
Yeah, because you have to do. All this.
Yeah.
That are,
It's trying to see which hundred ones are there, because otherwise they'll have to get a day off work too.
So,
That's
Is there any
it.
questions?
Yeah, as you know, we all have to necessarily agree with the petition.
Very, very confusing.
so. we will endeavor to have a resolution prepared by the next meeting
Yeah.
to set the date for the election, set the parameters for the election,
Right.
and start that work. Okay, next up. New hire.
State recreation had just promoted a CIT to a recreation attendant. So I'd like, I know you're, so I would like to make a motion to hire Tyler Delaney at a rate of $15.75 per hour as a recreation attendant at Enderfield Playground.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. And then we've got 2 sets of minutes.
One sec.
More stable.
Oh, one is,
So it's just in the agenda, so everyone can find it.
so we have the one set, 7:12.
I'll make a motion to approve minutes from the July.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
I believe I was not at that meeting, so I
Motion passes. And then the abstract number 15.
excerpt number 15 is in the amount of $561,974.99. And there's no winner. This is just regular stuff.
As the person who I know, yes, we love it.
Yeah. I hope.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Anything else?
Yes,
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, okay.
so I'm,
Okay, thank you.
so we're gonna do this in a minute. We've been talking about entering into a contract with the engineer, at several meetings. I did get an engagement letter earlier today to review, and reviewed it. The terms and conditions, economic terms and conditions are as follows. It would be a retainer of $36,000 per year to, provide general engineering services to the town board and or the town projects. That would include, so it would be $3,000 per month, and it's approximately 4 to 8 hours per week on the retainer services.
So is that on like the town board engineering line?
Okay,
And that will be also in support of some departmentals.
yeah. Then there would be special type projects that would require engineering, potentially could require engineering, which would be billed separately. Based on a schedule that's been provided for the senior project manager, 130, senior engineers, senior architect, 130, engineer architect, 100, junior engineer, 90. This was a rate schedule, and before any work could be undertaken by them, they would have to have a written proposal to the town explaining what they thought the time would be and who would be doing it, and then the town board would have to approve that.
Similar to how we do a lot of the drainage.
Yeah.
I guess my question though is 30,000 under town board, does it also include planning?
No.
They use.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, so the color it will be.
Yeah, the retainer is going to pay for the engineer to be available for 40 hours.
So part of it would be.
And highway,
And,
because that's what I was wondering, if part
yeah, yeah, so there'd be a piece of it in it as well.
So
So
there's
that-
30,000, but it's townwide.
It's townwide and there's a team, so there's one person. has their own, you know,
A highway and.
planning, and they get attention from it.
So they use it more than.
Yes.
Well, it's,
On your computer, this is my legal understanding, the planning board has its own.
No, not the planning board.
Okay.
Code.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about planning board. I'm sorry. Yes, so highway, it's not just. It's everybody, but the planning board. This is the rule of the site plan, and special permits and everything that does.
Yeah.
That's what I make sure.
Yes. And so there's only one component of it that I just think was probably a mistake. Where they talk about reimbursable expenses, like permit and review fees. Obviously, we don't have any review fees. Printing and plans and specifications that we would have to pay for separately, but we don't have those. So I will talk to the engineer and try to resolve that. Sarah did bring up an issue about insurance, and I think she's correct, we'll have an insurance provision in there, just making sure they have their malpractice insurance in place, and I don't think you name anybody on your malpractice insurance like you would on a liability insurance, so we just work those out. So if everybody's comfortable, I'm comfortable that the economic terms are all what we talked about. We can authorize supervisor to sign the engagement letter, because it really is. First. Contingent on just my.
So I will make a motion to authorize the supervisor to sign the agreement with the Bella Associates contingent on legal review. And I'm in the down.
No, I seconded a bunch of people seconded. Well, yeah, I read.
Okay.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, carries. We'll say, following that, we have had a very productive relationship with Bella so far, is to see if they have applications that were able to do that, so.
Do you want to address public questions that were raised by the?
Yeah, we'll get to it, because I'm sure we're gonna continue to get questions pouring in.
Okay.
I mean, I think that we've addressed, so I have here the cost, we don't know, as far as moving it, there's no possibility, publicity, we addressed that.
Okay.
Residency requirement, yes, anybody who lives in town Memphis is eligible to vote. And I think the one question was, were the signatures themselves validated?
So, well, no, were they certified?
No.
There is no requirement for the town clerk to certify the signatures to match them up against signatures that were filed at the Board of Elections, because frankly, they have no access to them.
Yeah.
So there's no requirement to certify that. The other question was, do you have to be a resident of the ward to run? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
You have to be. That's in town law. 89.
Okay.
Let's make a motion.
I'll second.